So in today's video, I'm going to be reacting to my original 2023-24 League 2 table predictions. If you do go on to enjoy, please make sure to drop a like on there for me. If you could try and hit 150 likes on today's video, that'd be massively appreciated. Subscribe if you're new as well. We're on the road to 9,000 subscribers, so please make sure you are subscribed. If you haven't already, with that post notification bell on, it's free to do so, and it does massively help out. Get your thoughts in as well down in the comment section down below. Let me know down below your League 2 table predictions. How well have you done? As always, we're going to go through and compare my prediction to where the team actually finished, and then for every place different, you gain a point. You want as least points as possible, and then we'll compare it to the amount of points that I have picked up over the last couple of seasons. But make sure to drop a like on there for me, subscribe if you're new as well, and let's get into it. Starting out then in 24th position, I predicted at Crawley Town. They did a lot better than that, you could say. They ended up finishing in 7th in the playoffs. I was 17 places out with this one, and it was my joint worst prediction. There is another prediction which is just as bad in this video, but I think you've got to firstly give massive credit to Scott Lindsay. Probably, in my opinion, the League 2 manager of the season. The job that he has done at Crawley, I think everybody predicted Crawley to be relegated, and 99% of them people probably had them to finish bottom of the league. You look at the summer business, the players they lost, and also the players they brought in, the fact that they've managed to finish in the playoffs, and to be fair, probably deserved to do so in the end. You know, in the two games I saw against Crawley on the opening day, probably deserved to win, but I don't think they were particularly great. But then when they beat us 4-2 in January, they looked very threatening on the counter. The fact that Scott Lindsay has managed to turn Danilo Orsi into a 20-goal season striker is absolutely incredible, because he's never really had that in his career. So a massive credit does need to go to Scott Lindsay. I genuinely did not see Crawley staying in the division this season. You look at their off-the-field issues that they had at the start of the campaign, they don't really seem to be a thing anymore. I've not really heard too much about it recently, but massive credit has to go to Scott Lindsay and his team as well. Some of the players have massively stepped up this season, and I had an absolute rotter with that one. Let's move on then to 23rd position. Then I predicted Crewe Alexandra, another team which I was 17 places out on because they finished at 6th in the table. I wasn't confident in Lee Bell as their manager. Again, I looked at their summer business, losing Dan Adjei, and I didn't see a natural goal scoring replacement in their side, and I did think they were going to massively struggle. But some of their younger players massively stepped up this season. Elliot Nevitt has had a really good goal scoring campaign. He's kind of replaced Dan Adjei's goals, whilst in yesterday's League 2 playoff semi-final, first leg against Doncaster, they were absolutely shocking. Clearly, in terms of their full league season, they have had a very good campaign. I would never expected Crewe to have finished in the playoffs. I thought some of their signings were a little bit interesting. I wasn't massively impressed with their summer business. No one expected Mickey Dimitriou, a 33-year-old centre-half at the start of the campaign, to come up with 14 goal contributions this season, 8 goals and 6 assists. Again, massive credit does need to go to Crewe. We're 2 positions in here, and I've accumulated 34 points. This has been an absolutely terrible start to my League 2 predictions, and to be honest with you, it doesn't really get much better. In at 22nd position then, I predicted Morecambe FC. They ended up finishing in at 15th, so again, 7 places out on that one. They've had a number of different managers this season. Started out the season with Derek Adams, but again, I looked at their summer business and saw the amount of players that they lost and some of the signings they brought in. I wasn't massively impressed. Some of their loan signings, I think, massively helped them out. There was a period in the season where you thought, you know, Morecambe were a real contender for the playoffs, but then they got that points deduction and kind of faded away towards the back end of the season. But I'm not a million miles away from this one in terms of 7 places out, but I feel like the difference between 22nd and 15th is quite a significant one, and I knew Morecambe would have enough to survive because obviously they've had a number of different off-the-field issues this season. Thankfully for their sake, it hasn't translated on the field, but I do hope for their fans' sake they can get that sorted out going into next season, and who knows what could happen for Morecambe at next campaign. But as of right now, I do feel massively sorry for their fans, and my prediction there wasn't a particularly great one. In at 21st place, I predicted Newport County. They finished 3 better in 18th, so again, not a million miles away on that one. I didn't really see them progressing any higher up the table. Again, I look at their summer business, wasn't massively impressed by it, and I knew Newport wouldn't really be in any real danger of relegation. I thought they might be a little bit closer than where they actually ended up finishing. I think throughout the whole season they were never really threatened by relegation, but it was a really poor end to the season. I think they lost the last 7 or 8 matches, so they don't want to take that form into next campaign. But 3 places out on that one, not a horrible prediction. In at 20th position then, I predicted Forest Green Rovers. They actually ended up finishing in 24th. They finished 4 positions worse than that, and it was just a horrible season really all around for Forest Green. Manager failure after manager failure. They ended up finishing the season with Steve Cottrell. I think was certainly the best out of all their managers. They gave Troy Deeney, was it 6, 7, 8 matches, something like that, and yeah, really baffling decisions. You look at some of the players they signed, and just really baffling. In January, signing Emmanuel Sidibe from Bradford City. Well, he wasn't too bad. If you're signing that sort of calibre, a type of player who can barely even get onto the bench at another League 2 club, who at that moment in time was struggling around the bottom half of the table, I just didn't really understand their recruitment. It was just a horrible season really for Forest Green, and to be honest with you, I'm kind of glad they've gone down, because who on earth wants to go to Forest Green away? And 4 places out, not a horrible prediction. I thought they'd stay up. They ended up finishing at rock bottom, but again, only 4 places out, so not too bad. In at 19th position then, I predicted Harrogate Town. They finished 6 places better in 13th, so not a particularly great prediction from me there. I didn't think they'd have any real trouble of relegation, but I didn't see them finishing as high as 13th. I looked at the start of the season when Luke Armstrong was refusing to play, and I didn't really see who was going to replace them goals. Abraham Odo came in from Rochdale and had a pretty solid season. Matty Folds again defensively absolutely brilliant for them in his first full season at Harrogate. Anthony O'Connor had an absolutely outstanding campaign. They brought back James Belshaw to the football club as well. On the whole, another pretty successful season for Harrogate. Mid-table in League 2, they're still massively overachieving them. Big credit needs to go to Simon Weaver and his squad, and that prediction from me isn't a particularly great one. In 18th place, I predicted at Colchester United. They finished 4 places worse off in 22nd. I said I didn't think they would have any real trouble of relegation, but they only just about managed to survive, and I just don't really understand why everything seems to go wrong at Colchester, because they always seem to sign, on paper, some decent players, but they never really seem to do well. They always seem to be in some sort of a relegation battle. Ben Garner, I saw as a manager, which was never going to work out. I predicted him to be sacked at the start of the campaign. He was. Eventually the Cowleys came in, and I would say I expected better since when they came in. I expected Colchester to really kick on. They didn't do that. They just about managed to survive, and I think they do need a massive summer rebuild this season. I genuinely think they need to make 20 signings and get a load of this dead wood out the door, because they've got so many players who are just not really good enough for the level, and they've just about managed to scrape a void in relegation over the last couple of seasons, because some teams were worse off than Colchester, not necessarily because they deserve to stay in the division. And that prediction, again, not a million miles away from it with that one, but I certainly thought their finish in the table would be much more comfortable than what it actually was. In 17th position then, I predicted Walsall FC. They finished 6 places better in 11th. I didn't really see them challenging for the playoffs, but there was a genuine period in time when Walsall were a playoff contender. They ended up finishing around mid-table, and I just looked at their side and I didn't really see a natural goal scorer in there, apart from maybe Danny Johnson. It turned out he was never really their answer. He didn't really play much this season. I was not convinced by Matt Sadler, their manager, and there was a period, I would probably guess around February, March, where they went on a really good winning run and got themselves, you know, actually in the playoffs at one point, but then they faded away towards the back end of the campaign. 2-0 up against Bradford City at home in a game they needed to win, ended up throwing it away against a team who finished the game with 10 men for the large part. And yeah, Walsall, I'll probably say another season of failure for them. It certainly wasn't as bad as what I originally predicted, but on the whole, not a great prediction and not a great season for the Saddlers. In 16th position then, I predicted Accrington Stanley. It's the closest prediction I've had so far, as they ended up finishing in 17th. I thought they'd be around that middle sort of period between mid-table and the bottom half of the table, so again, not too bad of a prediction. I was impressed with some of their signings in the summer. They had that experience. I certainly didn't expect to see John Coleman be sacked, but again, didn't know about the sort of communication breakdown between John Coleman and his assistant manager, and then also their owner as well, and it's a real shame what's kind of happened there. The communication seems to have massively broke down. Their relationship seems to be absolutely terrible now, and unfortunately it has ended on quite a sour note for John Coleman. In 15th position then, I predicted AFC Wimbledon. They finished 5 positions better in 10th. I never really saw Wimbledon as a serious playoff contender, but only finished a couple places out of it. I thought they'd finish in the bottom half. I'm not convinced on Johnny Jackson as a manager. They lost Al Hamadi in the January transfer window. I wasn't really impressed by their summer recruitment. I thought they'd signed a lot of just average League 2 players, not really much quality in there. I like the signing of James Tilley, but when you've got strikers like Josh Davison leading the line, you're never really going to be a real playoff contender. I thought they'd do a little bit worse than where they actually ended up finishing, so not a particularly great prediction again from me there. In 14th position then, I predicted Swindon Town. They ended up finishing at 5 places worse off in 19th, and at a period in time, you know, when they lost Dan Kemp and Jake Young in January, I do think there was kind of a little bit of a fear over relegation, but it's such a shame what's happening to Swindon, because they're a massive club for League 2 and their owner's just kind of ruining it completely. I genuinely think if they didn't have Dan Kemp and Jake Young for the first half of the campaign, campaign, they would have probably gone down this season, which is crazy to say, but them two were massive for them, especially Dan Kemp. I was massively impressed by that signing in the summer. Obviously, I've made this prediction based on the fact that them two would be there for the full campaign, and I think if they were there for the full campaign, 14th wouldn't have been a bad prediction. I was 5 places out. I thought they'd be around mid-table. They ended up in, I wouldn't say a relegation battle, but they were certainly closer to that than where they were the playoffs, which is where they want to be at the end of the season. So again, not a particularly great prediction, but certainly not the worst one we'll see in today's video. In 13th and the final team in the bottom half, I predicted Sutton United. They finished 10 places worse off in 23rd and were relegated into the National League. I looked at their recruitment in the summer, and there was a period where I thought Sutton are my underdogs this season. I think they might finish in the playoffs. Thank God I didn't predict that, because that would have been even worse than my Crew and Crawley shouts. But Sutton just had a horrible season under Matt Gray. He got the sack after many years at the football club. They then gave it to the assistant manager, which I didn't really understand, because it's going to be very similar ideas, and it was just a massive season of failure. So many signings that didn't work out. You look at the likes of Liangle, Dion Pereira, for example. On paper, they signed some really good, experienced players, but it didn't work out for Sutton. I thought they'd finish mid-table. They ended up getting relegated into the National League. Terrible prediction from me there, but again, nowhere near the worst ones of today's video. We are now halfway through, so if you are enjoying it, please make sure to drop a like on there for me. 150 likes on today's video would be massively appreciated, and don't forget as well to subscribe. In 12th position then, I predicted Tranmere Rovers. They finished 4 places worse off in 16th position, so not an awful prediction to be fair. I did say that I expect Ian Dawes to be sacked, and I was surprised that it took so long, to be honest with you. Nigel Adkins came in, and I feel like if they'd have brought him in straight away and didn't do the interim and then gave him the permanent, they might have finished a little bit closer to 12th position. Obviously, Rob Apter played a massive factor in that. He's a match winner, someone who can score something out of nothing. He can play a 3 out of 10 all game, and then he'll come up with a brace and win Tranmere the match. He had an absolutely exceptional season with Tranmere, especially the second half of the campaign. It's a shame really they couldn't kick on. I do think there was too many players at Tranmere who kind of just work hard, especially going forward, but don't really have that end product. And I think going into next season, I do think Nigel Adkins is the man to take them forward. Can they maintain a playoff charge next season? I guess we'll have to wait and see, but they did kind of fall off towards the back end of the campaign. And again, not an awful prediction, only 4 places out on that one. In at 11th position then, I predicted at Doncaster Rovers. They finished 6 places better in 5th. Now, if you're going back maybe 3 months, you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh, I might be 10, 15 places out on Doncaster. Well, maybe not 15 places out, but around 10 places out, because they were struggling near the bottom end of the table. But they got their January signings in, and they massively turned their season around. Ended up finishing it inside the playoffs, 6 places out. I never really saw that, to be honest with you. I was impressed with some of their summer recruitment, but for the large part, I don't think it was particularly great, and I do think a lot of people were overreacting to that. Their January window certainly saved them, and obviously you can't predict a January transfer window at the start of the campaign, but the likes of, is it Lutatala, the goalkeeper, and also Hakiba Doolican were 2 massive signings for them, and massively transformed their season. But big credit has to go to Grant McCann. He massively turned their season around, and again, not an awful prediction, but certainly not one of my best ones in this video. In 10th, I predicted Barrow. They finished 2 places better than that in 8th, so not a million miles away from that one. It was certainly looking for the large part of this season that I was going to be more than 2 places away, as they were in the playoffs for the majority of the season, but ended up missing out on the final day. They've got some good players, the Barrow. They've got a very good manager in Pete Wild, but that's a couple of seasons now where they look dead cert for a playoff position, even an automatic shout at some points as well. Then they end up bottling it towards the back end of the campaign, and that's maybe something you put down to the players, or maybe Pete Wild. They just kind of get burnt out with him. But on the whole, another successful season for Barrow. Again, similar to Harrogate, massively overachieving in League 2, and big credit does need to go to Pete Wild. I was only 2 places out on that prediction, but it certainly didn't look like that way for the majority of this campaign. In 9th position then, I predicted at Grimsby Town. They finished 12 places worse off in 21st. Again, another absolutely terrible prediction from me there. I genuinely thought they might have a chance of getting into the playoffs, but the reason why I didn't put them in there is I didn't see a 20-goal season striker, but they had an absolutely horrible season. I predicted at the start of the campaign Paul Hurst would be sacked. I think the ambitions and aims for Grimsby this season were to finish in the playoffs, but at one point it looked like they might genuinely go down, and they had the change of manager. David Artell came in, and I wouldn't really say he's won over the fan base, to be honest with you. His football is pretty boring and null. Some of his substitutions are very questionable, and it was a terrible season in the end for Grimsby. I think they need a big summer rebuild. I was massively surprised though to see Gavan Holohan has been released by the football club, a goal scoring midfielder at this level. Don't really understand that. Grimsby fans, let me know down below why he has been released, but on the whole, again, another really poor prediction from me. It's certainly not been a good year from me, has it? In 8th position then, I predicted my team at Bradford City. We finished one place worse in 9th, so one of my better predictions in this video. You can certainly tell that I know my football club better than most, as I knew this season we were never ever going to be a real contender for the playoffs. The previous season was a much weaker league, and some of the teams coming up from the National League, like your Wrexhams and your Notts Counties, were going to be real threats this season. Well, that's certainly what I thought at the start of the campaign. I thought we massively got the summer recruitment wrong. I said that in my original video, and it certainly proved to be that way. Even now, I look back at some of our summer signings, and some of them are absolutely awful. Majority of them have either spent the full season injured or just lacking the quality, really. It was a terrible summer, one of the worst transfer windows we've had for a number of years. If you go back and look through individually all the signings we made and how many games we won when they started, it is absolutely terrible to see. I would be surprised if it's over double figures, to be honest with you. We never really won when most of them players played. An absolutely shocking transfer window, and we just got it massively wrong. Mark Hughes got the sack at the start of October. We then took over a month to appoint Graham Alexander, who'd been sacked by MK Dons. We started out well under Alexander, then went on a really bad run, then went on a really good run, then had 4 or 5 horrible games, then ended the season with 6 or 7 straight wins and a pretty decent unbeaten run. And I'm confident going into next season more than I was at the start of this campaign, but again, it massively depends on summer recruitment. We have to get it right. Our owner has promised more money to spend in the transfer window. We've actually got someone who knows about football in David Sharp managing the football side of the football club, which is great news for us, and hopefully going into next season we can finally get out of this division. But I knew this year we were never really going to be a real promotion contender, and again, a pretty solid prediction from me there, just one place out. In at 7th position then, and another really poor prediction from me here. I was 13 places out as I predicted Salford City to finish in that final playoff spot, and they ended up finishing in 20th. Neil Wood got the sack quite early on. Carl Robinson came in, and I would have thought Robinson would have done better than where Salford ended up finishing, to be honest with you. I was massively surprised to see Salford finish 20th this season. Got some really good players on paper, got one of the bigger budgets in the division. Matt Smith scored goals for fun all season, but when you sign a striker like Matt Smith, it changes the way you play and kind of forces you to play a very direct way, getting balls into the box. And Elliot Waters spent the majority of this season injured or suspended as well, which is a big loss for them. He's been one of the best players in the division over the last 2 seasons, but has missed large parts of this campaign. Defensively, they've been very poor at times as well, and while they've scored a couple of goals, just defensively it's been a massive letdown for them this season, and a horrible prediction from me there. I thought they'd finish in the playoffs, where for the majority of this season they have been in a relegation battle. In at 6th position then, I predicted a team like Gillingham. They finished 6 places worse off in 12th, smack bang in the middle of the table. I didn't think they'd quite do as well as automatic promotion like what some people thought, but I certainly backed Gillingham for the playoffs. But they had a horrible start to the campaign. They just simply could not score, and Neil Harris eventually got the sack. They brought in, is it Stephen Clement or Clements, something like that, and he didn't really improve them much more than that, to be honest with you. On paper, they've got a very good squad, lots of League 2 appearances and experience in there, but just a massive season of failure. They really struggled to score goals, and defensively have looked pretty frail at times, and on the whole, a massively underperforming season for Gillingham, considering the money that they were spending in the summer, throwing it around willy-nilly on players like Johnny Williams, who ended up finishing the season with 1 assist and no goals. Absolutely terrible season from him, and I'm genuinely rather glad Bradford City didn't sign him and brought in Alex Patterson. Even though he spent pretty much all season injured, he still contributed more in terms of goals and assists than Johnny Williams, who played for pretty much every game this season. But yeah, a massive season of disappointment for Gillingham, and not a particularly great prediction from me there. It does get slightly better though over the next couple of predictions, as in 5th position I predicted MK Dons. They finished 1 better in 4th, so a pretty solid prediction from me there. Now the gap in real life between 4th and 5th was quite a significant one. MK Dons were pretty unlucky to miss out on automatic promotion. They obviously play tonight against Crawley Town. Obviously that was postponed, that was meant to be played yesterday. Absolutely baffling that Crawley have been unable to get that game on. But MK Dons, I thought, might struggle a little bit under Graham Alexander. I knew he was going to get the sack. He did in the end. On paper they had probably top 3 squads in this division. They had a really strong side, along with your Stockports, your Mansfield, even your Wrexhams as well, to be fair. So maybe 4th position was where they did deserve to finish, but I thought they'd do slightly better than where they did. But on the whole, a pretty solid prediction from me there. In 4th position then, I predicted Wrexham AFC. They finished 2 positions better in 2nd. I knew one of Notts County or Wrexham wouldn't get into the automatic promotion places. I was backing Stockport and Mansfield to go up automatically this season, but I didn't envisage it being Wrexham who dropped down into the playoffs. They ended up finishing in 2nd, so on the whole, a pretty solid prediction from me there. I thought they'd just about not squeeze into the playoffs, but drop out of the autos and finish in the playoffs. But in the end, they finished 2nd. They got automatically promoted pretty comfortably, as you would really expect, to be honest with you. They got one of the best squads in the division, obviously probably the biggest budget in the division as well, signed some real quality, and it'll be really interesting to see how they do get on in League One next campaign. Where do you think they'll finish in League One? Into my top 3 then, make sure you have liked and subscribed if you haven't already. In 3rd position then, I predicted Mansfield Town, and that is the first one of today's video, which I've got absolutely spot on. Now, we look for the large part like Mansfield were going to be finishing in 2nd this season, and it would have been another prediction that I got completely wrong, but thankfully they drew with Barrow on the final day and Wrexham won, so Mansfield did end up finishing in 3rd. I thought the season was finally going to be the year that the Stags would go up, ole ole, and they did, thankfully for their sake, because they've had one of the best squads in the division over the last couple of seasons, got a very good manager as well. They've finally got it right with their recruitment and kind of sacked off signing these old experienced players which Nigel Clough had worked with before, and we're signing some real League 2 and even League 1 proven players. You think the likes of Keeler, Donut, Louis Reed over the last couple of seasons. In the summer, bringing in players like Bailey Cargill, Callum Johnson, Aidan Flint. They had a really good season, and I'm so glad for them and their fans that they've managed to get promoted into League 1. I know we've got quite a good relationship with the Stags fans on this channel, so I'm happy for their sake that they have managed to get promoted. In 2nd position then, I predicted Notts County. They finished 12 positions worse off in 14th. I genuinely didn't see how bad Notts County's defence was until this season. Obviously, I don't really watch much National League football, but you look at some of their players on paper, you think the likes of Jody Jones, Macaulay Langstaff, Dave McGoldrick, Dan Crowley, and you think, yeah, they're definitely going to get automatically promoted again this season. But defensively throughout the whole campaign, absolutely shocking. Obviously the loss of Luke Williamson quite early on in the season, why did I say Luke Williamson? Luke Williams, sorry, at the start of the season was significant for them. Their new manager came in, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and didn't really improve them. If anything, took them backwards, to be fair. It took them like 3 months to win away from home and keep a clean sheet in the league, and that was obviously against my team Bradford City when they battered us 3-0 after being on a horrendous run of form. But yeah, on the whole, a really poor season for Notts County. And I'll be interested to know down in the comment section down below, where do you think that Macaulay Langstaff will end up? Do you think he'll stay at Notts County, or do you think he'll move on to bigger and better things? And finally then, in 1st position, I predicted at Stockport County, and where did they finish? In 1st, of course I did. So out of my last 3, I've got 2 absolutely spot on, but I feel like the top end of the table is much easier to predict in a lot of the divisions, especially at League 2, so I'm not going to take much credit away from that. There were some solid predictions in there, some horrible predictions in there, but Stockport was clearly one of my better ones. I backed them to win the league this season after having that playoff final heartbreak on penalties in the previous campaign against Carlisle, and I think they'll go one better next season as well and have a really solid season in League 1. It was announced yesterday some of their more experienced players like Paddy Madden and Ryan Crosdale, even Miles Hippolyte, will be leaving the football club, so they clearly really need to replace them. But I think Stockport have got it massively right off the field over the last couple of seasons, and it's translating onto the pitch now. I think next season will be a very solid season for Stockport as their first season back in League 1 in a number of years. So if you do add up all my points then based on my prediction compared to where they actually finished, and compare it to some of the other seasons, in the 20/21 campaign I picked up 155 points. In the 21/22 campaign I picked up 114 points. That was a really good season from me. Last season in the 22/23 campaign I picked up 140 points, and this season in the 23/24 campaign I can confirm I picked up 144 points. My second worst season so far since doing these League 2 playoff predictions. Obviously Crawley and Crewe, my first 2 predictions, both being 17 places out. If you take that away, then I end up finishing on 110 points, and it's my best season ever. But them 2 have massively hindered me. But then you also look at Sutton, 10 places out, Grimsby 12 places out, Salford 13 places out, and also Notts County 12 places out. I genuinely Don't think any of them at the start of the campaign were bad predictions, but unfortunately it's football and not everything is very easy to predict. So not a great season from me on the whole, but obviously I have had a worse one. But does that really count, seeing as though that was the COVID season? This is technically, without the asterisk next to it, my worst season to date in terms of predictions. Maybe my ball knowledge is getting worse and worse as each season goes by. Surely though, next season I must get a better score than 144. I'm going to leave it there then for today's video. If you have enjoyed it, please make sure to drop a like on there for me. If you could try and hit 144 likes, yeah, let's go for my score. I got 144 likes on today's video, would be massively appreciated. Subscribe if you're new as well. We are now on the road to 9,000 subscribers, so please make sure you are subscribed if you haven't already, with that post notification bell on. It's free to do so and it does massively help out. Get your thoughts in as well down in the comment section down below. Let me know down below your best and worst prediction and how many points did you accumulate as well. Thank you all for watching, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you very soon for another one. Peace.